Deep within Gough's Cave, in the ancient village of Cheddar in Somerset, researchers made an extraordinary discovery. They unearthed Cheddar Man, Britain's oldest complete human remains, dating back 10,000 years, but the intrigue didn't end there. Many years later, DNA test results stunned everyone. A local history teacher named Adrian Target actually had a direct genetic link to that ancient ancestor. Imagine the feeling of walking down streets where someone of your bloodline once lived, but 300 generations ago. This remarkable discovery bridged gaps thousands of years apart, showing us just how incredibly the past is woven into the present. In this episode, we'll unravel how centuries of migrations and adaptations shaped the genome of the British people. Through scientific discoveries and deeply personal stories like that of Cheddar Man, we'll see that the echoes of the past still resonate within every modern person. Join us as we step into the hidden chapters of British history, written vividly in our very genes, and we'll look at how the stories of ancient communities continue to endure and flow through people today. Before we begin our journey, let's quickly explore what DNA actually is and why it's the central character in this story. DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is like the ultimate blueprint of life. It's a molecule found in every cell of your body, containing instructions that make each of us unique. When discussing genetics and ancestral origins, experts typically focus on two main types of DNA. Y-chromosomal DNA is passed from father to son, carrying key information about the paternal line. Mitochondrial DNA is passed from a mother to all her children, helping trace maternal ancestry. Both types of DNA can be passed down from generation to generation continuously. Autosomal DNA, inherited from all our ancestors, is the key that geneticists use to piece together the complex picture of migration and population shifts in human history. This fascinating journey will take us deeper into the life and significance of Cheddar Man, a historical figure first discovered in 1903. He was a member of the Western hunter-gatherers, pioneer people who appeared in what is now Britain about 11,000 to 12,000 years ago. It was after the last Ice Age glaciers retreated that these Western hunter-gatherers became one of the first groups to return and re-establish life on the British Isles. They emerged right after the massive ice sheets retreated from this land. Genetic analysis didn't stop there. It also revealed a host of extremely intriguing findings never mentioned before. On the maternal line, Cheddar Man's mitochondrial DNA belonged to haplogroup U5b1, while the paternal line carried the I2, a 2 haplogroup marker on the Y chromosome. Interestingly, both of these genetic traces still remain scattered in modern British populations, albeit at a rather modest frequency. Even more shocking, scientists estimate that about 10% of the British gene pool today is directly inherited from Cheddar Man's hunter-gatherer community. The fact that these ancient genes survived thousands of years of upheaval, migrations, and invasions further confirms that Britain's genetic foundation is deeply rooted in a mysterious past. The geographical landscape during Cheddar Man's lifetime was completely different from today's map of Britain. At that time, Britain was still connected to mainland Europe by Doggerland, a natural land bridge in what is now the North Sea. This connection provided an easy migration route for people back then. Animals also lived on this land until sea levels rose and submerged it all more than 8,000 years ago, completely cutting off the British Isles. Around 6,000 years ago, a new, transformative chapter in Britain's genetic story began when the first European farmers arrived. These settlers came from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, and brought with them an unprecedented agricultural revolution. These new techniques completely changed the landscape and way of life for people in the British Isles. But they didn't just bring farming methods. They also introduced new genetic lines that blended into the indigenous population. Among the most noticeable changes was eye color. Prehistoric European farmers often had much darker brown eyes than Western hunter-gatherers, thereby altering the appearance of ancient British inhabitants. These migrants from Anatolia were the very people who built Britain's iconic monument, Stonehenge, about 5,000 to 4,500 years ago. However, within a short period, they were replaced by a genetically different people, taller and with lighter skin. Around 4,500 years ago, they represented the famous Bell Beaker culture. Clearly, the genetic picture of this era is extremely complex and challenging. The culture mentioned here is famous for its distinctive pottery, which originated in Spain and Portugal around 2800 BC. As this culture gradually spread across Europe, it began to blend with migrant groups moving westward from the vast Eurasian steppe. These people from the steppe were closely linked to the Yamnaya culture, a culture that once existed in what we now know as Ukraine and Russia. The group that finally entered Britain around 2500 BC not only brought distinctive cultural practices, but were also genetically completely different from the Bell Beaker people originating from the Iberian Peninsula. The amount of ancestral genes they carried from the steppe was extremely significant. These communities were especially skilled at horse domestication and the use of chariots, and they also brought those advanced techniques to new lands. A typical representative of the migrants of that era is the Amesbury archer, whose 4,300-year-old grave was found by archaeologists near Stonehenge. The arrival of this new population group left an enormous mark on the genetic makeup of the entire island of Britain. They introduced genes for lighter skin into Britain, and these genes may have made blue eyes and blonde hair increasingly common among the native population. Not only that, they very likely also brought the ability to digest milk in adulthood, a highly important biological trait at the time. This migration had an undeniable impact, and it was truly enormous. A study published in Nature in 2018 showed that the introduction of steppe-related ancestral genes was directly linked to the replacement of about 90% of Britain's gene pool. In just a few short centuries, this is considered one of the greatest and most important genetic changes in the entire history of the region. However, the story of Britain's genetic flow continues, with no signs of coming to an end. Moving into the Late Bronze Age, specifically around 1000 to 875 BC, Britain received another significant wave of immigration. This migration noticeably increased the proportion of early European farming ancestry in the population, especially in southern England. According to another study published in Nature in 2021, migrants arriving during this period contributed about half of the ancestry of modern-day English and Welsh people. From the Iron Age onward, these newcomers had genomes very similar to ancient individuals who once lived in the region of France. Many researchers suggest that this wave of migration may have played a key role in introducing ancient Celtic languages into Britain. Although the origins of Celtic languages remain a highly debated topic, scholars such as Barry Cunliffe argue that they may have developed right on British soil. Not only in Britain and Ireland, but across the Atlantic coastal region, these languages once served as a bustling trade link between communities. Yet, by the time the Roman army invaded, ancient England was still primarily inhabited by the Celtic people of Britannia. They shared a common Brittonic language, a Celtic language that, over the course of history, gradually split into what are now Welsh, Cornish, and Breton. The Celts left an incredibly strong mark on British culture, not only spreading new techniques and innovative artistic styles, but also shaping a completely distinct social structure. The Celtic heritage remains deeply visible in the language, mythology, and customs preserved to this day, quietly contributing to the unique cultural identity of the United Kingdom and Ireland. Now, let's fast forward the film of history to reach the era of the mighty Roman Empire. The Roman conquest of Britain actually only began in AD 43, ushering in a period of rule that lasted 400 years. So what impact did this long Roman rule have on the genetic makeup of the people of Britain? Surprisingly, recent studies indicate that the genetic impact of Roman occupation on Britain was rather small. Although Rome left an indelible mark on Britain's culture, language, and infrastructure, the genetic legacy it left behind appears to have been very modest. This further reinforces the view that the Roman presence in Britain was primarily one of dominance and cultural influence, not the wholesale replacement of the native population. However, it was the large-scale migration that followed that truly brought deep and lasting changes to the genetic structure of the British people. Around the beginning of the 5th century AD, the Angles and Saxon tribes from the ancient lands of Germany and Denmark began their migration to Britain. History calls this massive movement of peoples the Anglo-Saxon invasion. This figure accounts for up to 40% of the ancestry of many people in Britain today. According to estimates from a 2016 study, The average modern inhabitant of East Anglia has about 38% ancestry originating from Anglo-Saxon migrations. This level of influence varied by region, with Anglo-Saxon ancestry proportions in eastern, central, and southern England ranging from 10% to 40%. This genetic variation is clearly reflected in changes in the prevalence of certain DNA haplogroups. Before the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons, the dominant haplogroup on the Y chromosome of the British was R1b, P312, particularly its subclade RL21. However, early medieval Britons carried a large proportion of haplogroups originating from mainland Europe, including R1b, U106, R1a, M420, I201, L420, I2 L400, og traits and I2 mitochondria og 53. These genomes are found mainly in northern and central Europe, revealing the deep origins of the Anglo-Saxon migrations and the Viking seafarers of old. The image most people tend to picture is that of crowded Nordic armies landing en masse on the shores of England. Everyone knows the Vikings left an enormous historical and cultural mark, especially in the lands of the Danelaw at that time. However, measuring their genetic influence is far from simple. Determining which genetic traces belong to the Anglo-Saxons who came from Denmark earlier, and which belong to the later Viking invaders from the same region, makes matters even more complicated. Many surveys have shown that they could not find any significant genetic signature from the Danelaw period. Although historical records and archaeology have clearly proven that the Vikings were present in England, current estimates indicate that the genetic contribution left by the Viking Age in England does not exceed 6%. However, different studies have produced conflicting results. The proportion of Viking ancestry can vary greatly depending on the specific region of England examined. In some localities, especially in the north and east, the proportion of Viking blood appears to be significantly higher. In the 11th century, the Normans carried out the last large-scale invasion of English territory. Although the Norman conquest dramatically changed England's language, legal system, and governing institutions, genetic studies show that their legacy in DNA is very modest. It seems that the Norman impact was limited to a small group of elite families who settled in England. So in the end, what do all the above reveal about the genome of modern English people? Modern-day English people possess an extremely interesting genetic picture, reflecting a complex chain of history filled with migrations and conquests. To understand more clearly, let's dive into analyzing which haplogroups are most common in England today. In terms of paternal lineage, haplogroup R1b on the Y chromosome is the most common, appearing in about 67% of English men. This haplogroup is thought to have appeared during the Bell Beaker period thousands of years ago, carrying genes for lighter skin and lactose tolerance. A notable detail is that different subclades within R1b reveal different pieces of the historical puzzle, for example, the R1b branch. Meanwhile, the U106 branch is associated with later Anglo-Saxon migrations, showing that many different migration waves may have contributed to one large haplogroup. In second place among the common Y DNA haplogroups is I1, found in about 14% of English men. It can be said that this haplogroup is very closely linked to both the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings, especially those of Scandinavian origin. The denser presence of this group in eastern and northern England aligns perfectly with historical records documenting the settlement of Anglo-Saxons and Vikings in those very regions. With lower frequency, haplogroups such as I2 have also been found, including subclade I2A2, which is the lineage of the famous Cheddar Man. This establishes a direct link between us and the earliest inhabitants who ever set foot in England. We must not forget R1a, a lineage linked to steppe ancestry, which likely entered England with the Bell Beaker people and later with Viking invasions. On the maternal line, the most common mitochondrial haplogroup is H, found in about 44% of the population. The H1 and H3 subclades stand out, especially for their high frequency. They trace their deep origins to early European farming communities, people who migrated from Anatolia to England around 6 millennia ago. In addition, there are other important mitochondrial haplogroups, such as J, found in about 11.5% of the population, which is also connected to Neolithic farmers. Haplogroup U5, at about 9.1% of the population, is considered one of the oldest lineages in Europe. This group creates a bridge, connecting modern English people with Western hunter-gatherers, such as Cheddarman. About 7.8% of the population carries haplogroup K, another trace connecting to the Neolithic migrations and the spread of agriculture. If we look at autosomal DNA, the part of the genome inherited from all ancestors, we can see the contribution of all these ancient communities. Scientists estimate that around 10% of the genome of today's English people comes from Western hunter-gatherers. The contribution of early European farmers is also very significant, especially in the south of England. The profound influence of the Bell Beaker ancestry group and steppe populations cannot be denied. Anglo-Saxon migrations contributed up to 40% of ancestry in some parts of England, especially visible in the east. Through the above analysis, it can be seen that England's genetic picture is a tapestry intricately woven from many distinct ancestral lines. However, England's heritage is not confined to DNA molecules. Just as genetic traces help us illuminate our origins, those marks also help build a linguistic map that reflects the rich historical depth of England. It is these names that have woven a compelling story of conquests, migrations, and social transformation, all contributing to the unique identity of England. To begin this story, let's review the enormous impact of the Normans. Since the Norman conquest of England in 1066, surnames like Beaumont, Sinclair, and Mandeville began to spread and were adopted by many families. Notably, the origins of these names are often extremely interesting and surprising. In French, Beaumont means beautiful hill, while Sinclair is formed from St. Clair, the name of a region in Normandy. However, before the Normans arrived, England already had its own distinct Anglo-Saxon heritage, and that is still present in popular surnames today. You've probably heard quite a few names ending in son, haven't you? This suffix means son of. For example, Johnson is son of John, and Wilson is son of Will. An interesting detail, Atkins is actually a shortened, informal variant of the name Adam. We can't overlook the mark the Vikings left on English culture. Many names like Thorpe, Ingram, or Thurston actually originate from the distant Nordic lands. A typical example is Thorpe, which comes from an Old Norse word used to refer to a village or settlement. Celtic influence also helped shape familiar surnames like Wallace and Trevor. Specifically, Wallace derives from the Old English word wheel, referring to a foreigner or a Welsh person, while Trevor is composed of the Welsh tre and ma, meaning homestead and large respectively. Additionally, occupational influences are also an important piece of the English surname picture. Typical examples are Smith, the blacksmith, Baker, the bread maker, or Fletcher, the arrow maker. All reveal the professions of our ancestors from long ago. Besides that, place names and geographical features also left a significant influence on English surnames. For instance, surnames like Hill, Wood, and Brooks may reflect the very places where ancestors once lived. Moreover, English surnames can also reflect personal characteristics, such as the surname White, meaning white, often given to someone with fair hair. These surnames can also reveal the father's name. Richardson means son of Richard, or even social status, for example, knight or retainer. As we've seen, the genetic history of England is like a complex tapestry woven from many different cultural threads, from ancient hunter-gatherers like Cheddarman, through Bronze Age farmers, Celtic tribes, Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, and Normans. This lineage stretches on endlessly. Each community has left its own mark on England's genetic map. If this journey fascinates you, why not check out our video series on the genetics of Ireland, Scotland, Spain, and Palestine? Each video offers unique insights into human migration and cultural exchange. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next genetic adventures. Your support is what drives us to go further. Is there a community you'd like us to explore next? Leave a comment below and let us know if you found this video worth watching. Hit like and share this with your friends right away. Thank you for joining us on this genetic adventure across England. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of genetics and human history.